This is a watercolor technique using acrylic paints. I'm going to be using number 6, a number 1 rigger, and my 3/8 flat. And so we are doing the reverse of what you would do in watercolor. We're going to go dark first, and then we're going to go light. We're going to start off with our mixed black using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And this is a piece of 300-pound watercolor paper. I use the 300-pound watercolor paper. You see it's not taped down. This is much more resistant to creating waves or curves in the paper as it gets wet. There are other ways to control that, but so I'm going to start off by doing a drawing of, this is Descheny Falls up just outside of Thunder Bay. It's a stunning waterfall or series of cascades. This is just a small piece of it. I just changed out my rigger. I noticed the one that I had there was not particularly clean, so I am registered with the police as an incredible brush abuser. You have to forgive me that. So we're just going, the sheet of paper that we're working on is actually 13 by 13 inches. We're going to be trimming it down to a 12 by 12 at some point. So we're just going to come in here with a rough idea of where we're going. That's a little bit too dry. So the cascade's coming down here. So that's the slide motion, and scumbling is particularly desirable. Again, I am not worried about getting an exact match of what the subject matter is. We're just trying to get a feel for this. Can do some glazing here, just cleaning off that brush and let the water move the paint. You want to make sure that you do go to the edges, just so that you have the freedom to move it around to the best vantage point. We have ½ an inch either side, but you want to make sure that we can make those choices if we want. We're going to come in with some of this phthalo blue and burnt sienna and these trees. Just going to spray a little water on there just to get some interesting things happening. It's not the real color to be lifting with, but we'll try lifting some of that. This borders on, or is sort of a bit of a splash technique, which I will be doing a video on specifically. Even the 300-pound paper does start to curl, especially when you start spraying. So we're just going to use up some of this paint down here. The water in this reference picture will be going over top of that. So we want something dark. So you can see that I've cleaned my palette and started with a new sheet, and this is mostly because in watercolor we're not going to be using anywhere near as much pigment as we were in the previous rock paintings. So the sunlight is coming in on this side, and this side is mostly in shadow. So we're going to start with the sunlit side. So we're going to put a little bit more color than what you see in the reference. And you'll notice that I'm not using white because I'll be using the white of the paper. So, and one of the beauties of this is that if you were doing this in watercolor, you could not do what I'm doing here. I'm just doing a wash. Sorry, I let that dry a little bit too much. And over the dark, and it not lifting, because that's, I started doing watercolor way back, like maybe when I first was much younger, maybe a few years ago. And so it's always, you start with the lights and then you come in with the darks. So the colors I've laid down are the magenta, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, and phthalo blue. We will be adding white because we will be doing the water down below. We're going to put a little bit of green in there, just down by the water line. I think we'll just zip that green up a bit. So we're going to now come into some purple. One of the things I like about a watercolor technique is it's fast. Like you can lay down some very nice colors very quickly. So I think that's a little too red. So we'll, using lots of water here. You can hear that screaming in the background. That's actually screams of joy. The neighborhood kids are having fun on a lovely day. So we're going to come in quite a bit darker down here. This is where that So we're going to do a wash for the sky. So we're using the cobalt-like color, which is a mix of the ultramarine blue and phthalo blue. Why don't I buy cobalt? Because I don't need it. I can mix it, and these are just as permanent and a heck of a lot cheaper. That's that Scottish thing again. So we're just sweeping that through. I'm going to get a bigger brush here. Not big enough. So we've let that dry up a bit just so that we're not bleeding into the previous colors. And again, we do not have to fret about the colors running into or bleeding or re-wetting the colors that are already down. They're dry and they're locked in. So I'm just going to do a little bit more work in the dark on these trees. A lot of the scumbled texture you see is coming from the coarseness of the 300-pound paper. I've never seen a coarse canvas, pre-stretched canvas, but it is quite nice to work on if you're ever interested in trying to paint a little bit looser. It's very hard to hold detail on a very coarse surface. You usually have to make your own. Okay, so we're going to come down into the rock, so we're just going to make some more subtle cracks. We'll reinforce these. I think I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue just to make that. That wasn't a little bit, that was quite a bit. Just make these cracks a little bit grayer. When you look at the drawing or the painting I'm doing versus the reference I'm looking at, you might have a little trouble seeing where I'm actually painting from, but if I like the look of a crack somewhere, then I'm going to use that crack. So that's titanium white I put down. Titanium white is the white that you use 97% of the time. The zinc white is for transparency. So I think I'm just going to come here and just take ever so little bit of this. And that's just to make that white a little closer to the color of the watercolor paper. So I'm just going to come in and do a little bit of negative painting. And as long as you're not actually touching the white of the paper, it'd be hard for people's eyes to pick up any slight difference in the color. when you're doing negative painting, you're looking at both the positive and the negative, and you're also trying to remember to create a nice rhythm. Don't do a series of dots that are just mindlessly placed all the same size. You want to vary the shapes, vary the sizes, and look at the reference to get ideas of where the light is coming through. Okay, so we're going to switch to the number 6 rigger now, and we're going to do the water. Now, this falls is, like I said, near, this falls is near This falls is Cameron Falls near Thunder Bay, North Bay. And so one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they're painting water is they see white water and they immediately jump to that color. So we want to have lots of different colors happening. So that was a switch. This is ultramarine blue. I was using a phthalo blue, and so I'm just letting that brush dance over the canvas. I think we'll just come in and do a little purple as well. So you can come up on a point. And one of the things I'm going to just do is a little splashing of this. I don't know how much I'll do, but you see I'm cupping my hand, and that's because I don't want it to go everywhere. I don't like using a toothbrush for this. I find often when you're doing a toothbrush, people say, oh look, they used toothbrush to do that, because it does, you think it's a random mark, but it's actually fairly recognizable. If you love the toothbrush, great. This is actually a little stream that's coming down to meet the main passage. This cascade is full of side streams, some of them dry in the summertime. I actually went here in the spring because I wanted to see what it was like in full flow, but it's actually not that photogenic because there's so much water coming down that it's just blowing through everything. And the water sort of disappears into the cracks farther up. I've actually done it higher up than what we can actually see. I try to avoid doing the lines that look, I'll just like line, and that's going to look contrived. The key to painting well is to be really good looking and look to see, is that really a line, or is that a series of droplets that are forming a line, or is that a I mean, water fountains sometimes get close to lines, but waterfalls tend to be very chaotic. So that's wet and wet there, going into that blue. Some of this is going to get cut off on the bottom. I had put down a liquid titanium white. It doesn't make a difference to your painting. You just add more water to the high viscous one. But the liquid is sometimes handy because you can do it one-handed, whereas normally I use the jars. Even a tube, I guess you can use your mouth. But if you've ever had to pay for any dental work, it's a good idea to not use your mouth. So the one thing I'm keeping in mind, this water is flowing down, and up in here it's being shadowed a bit by the rock, but we can still have some that comes up a little bit higher. So this is how you can do the one-handed white addition. I'm just going to use just straight water there to blur some of those. Anything goes to get the marks you want. Yes, I'll let you, Max. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop. So we're going to mount this painting that we just finished there, or it has actually had time to dry. And so we're going to mount it with any medium, but a gel medium is a little bit better than a gel medium is a little bit better than a regular thin medium because it's a little thicker and it's not going to soak in quite as fast. Doesn't matter whether it's gloss or matte. So I'm just going to turn that over. I've got paper down just to make sure the table's perfectly clean because that is, and so we're just going to brush this on. Pay special attention to the edges because that's where you definitely don't want it peeling up. So we're putting it on there. This paper is, if you remember, is a 1/2 inch bigger in each direction than the wood panel that I'm going to stick it to. And so don't be too sparingly. The gel medium is a glue, so and now we're going to switch, putting it on the panel. Don't worry about it going off the edges. Try not to leave ridges in that because that wouldn't be a major problem because this is 300-pound watercolor paper, but it can still create a little bulge. So now what I'm going to do, because the edges are most important, I'm going to apply the medium to the edges on both pieces. Just put that extra in there. So now we're just set that in there. Now we're going to take that panel and we're going to turn it over and we're going to position that on, making sure that this is an easy one because there's lots of room, and we're going to push down on that and then we're going to turn it over. And so it's this is a brayer, and you're just going to make sure that sticks down well. And sometimes on the edges, this isn't sticking. So we're going to crease the edges even. So now we're going to flip that over, put that down like that, and we're going to get a knife and we're going to, keeping the blade right up tight, flat, so that we're not leaving any ribs, and don't necessarily have to cut it in one pass. Okay, so we're going to leave that upside down and we're going to find something heavy. And this fossil rock is ideal to weight that down. if you don't have that, you can even use water containers with water in it, or even jars of paint. And so we're going to let that dry. So this is the piece trimmed and stuck down on a birch panel. Nicely trimmed. And so now we're going to seal the watercolor paper. The parts that have had acrylic paint are sealed, but anything where there's a very light glaze or there's white paper has not been sealed. And so we want to seal that before we paint the edges, partly so it can hang on the wall. Unprotected, unframed. And so this is, once we put this on, this is very much just like having a piece of glass in front of it. So I seal the sides. When we paint the sides, it's going to seal it, but I want to make sure that I've sealed the edge of the watercolor paper, which is just on top of the ply, the birch plywood. So we'll just... So the canvas has been sealed, and the paper on top now is completely waterproof. And one of the reasons for doing this at this stage is so that I don't have to worry about getting paint on the top surface, because I can easily wipe that off. So I'm just mixing up. I think I'm going to paint the edges with a dark green, just because that's sort of the dominant color maybe on the front side. It's going to be nearly black, but so I'm just going to paint always going forward, because you don't want to scrape any paint onto the top surface. I think we need a little bit more burnt sienna in that. Also, don't have to worry about the edge of the paper sucking up any paint and soaking through. GoPro stopped recording.